We stood about 10 inches from each other just outside the Olympic pool at the University of Miami. I was looking into her blue eyes as she said, "Dr. Ruben, all I want to do is finish my career in dignity." I heard those words, but all I could see was the bright energy coming through her eyes, an immense potential she somehow was living in but not recognizing. So I said to her, "You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You don't have to prove yourself anymore. Your performance does not determine your dignity." There was silence. Her eyes got teary as she said, "I've always had to prove myself. Nothing is ever enough. I didn't know there was another way." She went on to win the US Nationals and realize her lifelong dream of becoming an Olympian. She is also now the mother of 3 beautiful children and an inspiration to the next generations of dreamers who want to thrive in dignity without having to prove their worth through external scores. Look, I love discovering new frontiers, discovering the impossible. Perhaps this is because exploring life as a possibility is personal to me. It is what has driven me for as long as I can remember. Basically, I don't know where my passion for dreaming began or where it comes from, but I was raised in a small community in Cali, Colombia, Latin America, as the youngest of 3 boys in a regular family that valued work, education, and simplicity above all else. And despite not coming from an athletic family, my parents and brothers played recreational tennis during the weekends. So just before I turned 7, my father asked me if I wanted to learn to play, and I jumped for the opportunity because I knew I wanted to spend more time with my family. Despite not having an athletic talent, by the age of 15, I had won 5 national championships. I had played the French Open and Wimbledon as a junior and the Davis Cup by the time I was 20. My sports career basically cemented in me the power of dreaming, but ended up influencing me beyond sports. It taught me the values of discipline, focus, and humility. It is what taught me to persevere and earn my way into some of the best academic institutions in the world. Seeing life as a possibility is what led me to partner with people like Brittany Viola to become an Olympian, Daniela Levine to become the first female mayor in the history of Miami, and partner through Zone 14 with organizations across the world, from the minors to lead into the major leagues of their respective sectors and industries. Well, many of you know this. Many of you know what I'm talking about because you have yourself come from regular families to play in the major leagues over your own field. We've all come to realize that creating the impossible is not a straight line and that there is no shortcut. Facing a system on a regular basis with many moving parts is a regular part of the game. And while the responsibility of reflecting positive, upbeat, and responsive brands starts with us, in the majors, it must be lived by everyone in your inner circles and their teams. Whether you're a founder or an organizational leader or public servant, the world that we live in is calling us all to the major leagues of our fields to be our very best, a best we've not known before. All of us, including everybody in our team, are being called to grow. And we all know that growth is not comfortable. Being in this room with all of us today means that you're leading an important sector of society, one that badly needs to break through to a new chapter of its life. We're being called to a new way of working, and none of us are excluded. It needs to be a team effort. While many of us know basically how to do it individually, that's why we're here. Individual capacity is no longer enough. Each of us is being pushed to help our teams work outside their comfort zone. We must understand this, and that we all have a relevance and a value that is no longer dependent on operational efficiency. It's not possible to innovate when we get stuck in plateaus, managing internal and external politics, establishing clearer lines of authority, addressing emergencies, and working to make our systems more efficient. Being stuck in operational mode because it is more concrete, clinging to our short-term wins for our self-worth is not going to cut it. Not in the major leagues. Look, we're in the early phases of consequential change in our organization and our society. And as we're noticing, setting up the building blocks is proving to be more challenging than we had expected. For those of us in the major leagues, this conversation of what's next, y ahora qué, cannot come at a better time, in view that we're indeed in a defining moment. A moment of truth in our world, where we as leaders have the opportunity to lead our families, organizations, country, and planet to a new era. What we at Zone 14 have seen this past year and over our work with high-performing organizations who are leading the field in sustaining positive progress in the majors is that we're making an assumption which makes it way more difficult for us to collectively break through new ground. In the next 15 minutes together, I will explore this assumption from the high-performance worlds of sports, business, and science, and offer you an alternative available to all of us, not just the privileged. Take a moment now. Ask yourself this question. Does creating the impossible depend on our identity? Does creating the impossible depend on our identity? As it happens in all industries, having an external scoreboard helps us to know if we're headed in the right direction. However, what determines us to go deeper and longer in the major leagues is different than what it was in the minors. Let me share an example with you. Andre Agassi, one of the greatest players that the world has produced, says this, the world of tennis, I meant, says this: the more he understood how others thought, the easier it became for him to win. The more he understood how others thought, the easier it became for him to win. Picture this. He played another former number one in the world, Boris Becker, played him 14 times, but he lost the first 3 times that they played. He was able to reverse that record and win 10 out of their last 11 matches. In essence, ending with a record of 10-4, 10 wins and 4 losses. I ask you, what do you think made the difference? Some of you might think it was strategy. Others might think, no, it was physical conditioning. No, I think it was his technique that he changed. And yet others might think it was his head or his confidence or his inner game. Well, it wasn't any of that. I am reminded of what Marcos Gonzalez, Anilu Vasquez, and Justin Nunez were highlighting earlier on. Namely, that if you want to unlock potential in people, it's important to consider where they are in their journey. What did Andrew do then to turn these results around? He started watching tape of Becker, studying his rhythm, his cadence, his beat, and noticed something weird with his tongue. Just as Becker was about to serve, to hit the ball, he would stick his tongue out, and it would either be in the middle of his lip or to the left of it. So if Becker put his tongue in the middle, he would serve up the middle of the court or into Agassi's body. If he put it to the side of his lip, he would serve up wide. Agassi learned to use this new information to make new decisions that would lead him to break the match open and win. Well, evidently, Agassi didn't have to fix his technique, his physical conditioning, his strategy, and much less fix his self-identity. What was the hardest part? If it wasn't getting more fit, improving his returns, or strengthening his self-concept, then what was the hardest part for him? It was unlearning a habit that he had learned from the very beginning, going about things as he had always done. But when you're in the major leagues, the deeper and longer you intend to go, in other words, the more influence and impact you want to have, the more you need to open yourself to different perspectives. So how does this translate to us as founders, as company owners, as presidents, leading intra and entrepreneurs and public servants? We often get caught up in conventional business practices such as office and organizational structure, budget approvals, or excusing our lack of progress by calling the game unfair, expecting our positions of the roles that we hold to give us our credibility. In other words, staying inside our boxes prevents us from seeing the forest from the trees, from seeing the nuances that drive the system, all of which threatens us all to a standstill, as we have experienced this past year. We have an immense capacity to deceive ourselves and to deceive each other, waiting for external circumstances to give us permission to win. Yes, we fall asleep to that pattern. And as I heard Martin Chavez affirm as well this morning, or earlier this afternoon, was that what he's seen has helped him and continues to drive him into systems that succeed, is turning our attention off of ourselves and the circumstances that. So I was saying that we have an immense capacity to deceive our own selves, and of course each other, waiting for external circumstances to give us the permission to win. As I heard Martin Chavez affirm earlier on, what has been helping him and continues to drive entire systems to succeed is turning the attention off of ourselves and our circumstances to the possibilities that we want to create. Turning the attention off of ourselves and putting it on what we want to create, on the possibilities that we want to create. In the major leagues, positions, labels, and titles are not the point. The work is the point. The work is the point. Placing our attention on our fears and limitations keeps us stuck in operational mode and brings us all to regular standstills. And if we don't wake up to our capitulating patterns of depending on external forces to determine our internal power, sustainable change and progress will remain a theoretical exercise. What makes the difference, everybody, is unlearning the habits that confine us inside our boxes, reacting to circumstances rather than finding creative solutions toward the possibilities that we dream of. As in Agassi's example, the pathway toward greater diversity, equity, and inclusion depends on learning to read the people we work with, depending on how we read the rooms we hold our meetings in, collaborating with others to see from different perspectives, and most of all, relentlessly increasing our capacity to leap outside the boxes we're in. Some of you might be saying, getting out of the box, expanding perspective, going into the unknown is easy for Agassi. But what about me? I'm not Agassi. Few of us are. So the question really becomes, is this relevant to the rest of us, to you, to me, to everybody? I suggest that it is, because instead of trusting, what we're thinking, we have data. So let me go to science. For those of you who might be saying, well, that's nice, Ruben, but how does this apply? I mean, is this really something that is generalizable, scalable? Well, stay with me. What does Major League Science have to say about getting out of the box into unknown possibilities? Well, first, it's important to know that the most precise science that we have that predicts human behavior and human emotion is evolutionary science. However, if we still don't have a science that explains where life comes from, then where do we go from there? Because what I'm talking about is heading into a possibility that we've not known before. So what does science say about that? Well, while we certainly have empirical evidence that there is life here on Earth, we can touch ourselves, and that's not new to anybody. But evolutionary science does not have the resources needed to explain how life emerges from mere physics and chemistry. What is interesting for us in our conversation, however, is that if we look at the mathematical structure of natural selection, in other words, of evolutionary science, it entails that the probability is exactly zero that our senses show us any aspect of objective reality. In other words, this is saying that our sensory systems never show us the truth about the structure of life or of our own selves as we know it. Look, for those of you who are curious about what I'm talking about now, you can check out the work of Donald Hoffman, who wrote the book, The Case Against Reality, and also his TED Talk named, Do We See Reality as It Is? Don happens to be my original mentor and the scientist who has had the biggest influence in my life. Okay, what does this have to do with the assumption of needing to fix our identity to enter a new chapter of our lives? Well, if science is helping us realize that we don't see the full story of reality, then how can we expect the reality that we see to reflect who we are, and more than that, determine our dignity? Have we gone crazy? It just doesn't make sense. Just as the challenges faced in the major leagues are not solved by the methods once proven to be useful in breaking through in the minors, to break through the complex challenges that we now have and are now facing in society requires much more than short-term prescriptive therapeutic approaches. I can't tell you how powerful this is. And it is incredibly inspirational because it relaxes our need to know and also our need to prove ourselves through what we know and what we achieve. Let it go. Expecting our external reality to determine our value disengages us from learning, and eventually disengages us from our capacity to take risks and go into our true possibility. This is a game changer, guys. A watershed moment for us all in humanity. It means that just as the very predicates of space and time, in other words, our neurons and our atoms, need to be seriously revised, we also need a serious revision of assumptions that have consistently led us to die with our music still inside of us. Doing so has gotten us stuck. This wrong assumption gets us stuck because it hypnotizes us to stop evolving. If you're leading in the major leagues of your respective field, you're constantly facing hard choices. Of course, it's not pretty work. But here is the point. We must rise up to a new way of working, and none of us are excluded. We're all dealing with this challenge, and we need to remember that we need to let go of assumptions that keep us blind to our own blindness. Like Mary Oliver says in her poem, Wild Geese, we do not have to walk on our knees anymore, repenting about our limitations and our less than perfect selves. Yes, of course, you can tell me about your despair, and I can tell you about mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. In moments of truth, we come to a juncture where we have to leap into the possibilities we have not yet seen. We need to go through those edges because on the other side, there is a new world. As we head into the break, I share with you a poem that has lived with me for many years by Juan Ramón Jiménez. It's called I Am Not I. I am not I. I am this one walking beside me whom I cannot see, whom at times I manage to visit, and whom at other times I forget. Soy este que va a mi lado sin yo verlo, que a veces voy a ver y que a veces olvido. Yo no soy yo. El yo que yo soy está siempre por descubrirse. Amigos míos, compañeros, colegas, líderes de nuestra cultura latina en Estados Unidos, ladies and gentlemen of the Latin leadership of this country, of course, we forget about ourselves and each other. We start coming into our stories, many of which are not even ours. I am not I. I am this one walking beside me whom I cannot see, whom at times I manage to visit and whom at other times I forget. The one who remains calm and silent while I talk and forgives gently when I hate, who walks where I'm not, and who will remain standing when I die. See you guys on the other side. Muchas gracias. Un abrazo a todos.